Hey everybody, Tekking here. How you guys doing? One more chapter of Bleach left. I'm sure a lot of you are in high spirits right now. I bet a lot of you are sitting there just being like, man, I read that second to last chapter of Bleach and that was just so fulfilling emotionally and storytelling. I think this might be the best ending of a story ever. You know, I was gonna say maybe like Shakespeare or something, but no, this is even better than that. Macbeth, where like everybody dies at the end. Screw that shit. This is really gold right here. Okay, sarcasm aside, we all know that Kubo is more than likely being rushed. I feel like I should mention that. I mean, I've said it before a shit ton of times in other videos, but I feel like I have to mention it there because someone's probably gonna leave the comment like, you know, he's probably being rushed, right? I'm like, I know. Kubo, you know, we might have our differences of opinion on some of the stuff he's done earlier on in the series. I don't really agree too much with the way that the Aizen fight ended. That fake Karakura, I have some problems there. But, you know, there's some parts that I enjoyed, you know, genuinely. Like, I feel like Ukiyora's death was probably handled really well. I don't think any way I could have really improved on that. He's a good writer, and I would take this moment to go and recommend that you go read some of the other stuff he's done that I've reviewed on this channel. I've done reviews of every single chapter of his short-lived Bleach on the mind. Short-lived manga series, Zombie Powder. I'll put a card up here for the playlist for that. That was a pretty decent series, considering that Kubo was like massively depressed when he wrote it. But yeah, he's not a bad writer. You know, he lacks in certain departments, but he's not a bad writer. And this was certainly not the way I could have seen him, you know, writing the end of this story. Like, I'm sure he probably came up with a decent ending for this story, like, years ago. And I can guarantee you, whatever that was, it wasn't this. But I decided to take this moment to give you guys some retrospective on how I got into Bleach. I don't think I've ever made a video. I might have mentioned this on a few live streams, but I've never made a video dedicated to talking about how I got into Bleach. Yeah, so I figured what better place to put it in than now. Also, the review will be out tomorrow for the second to last chapter. I probably should have brought that up first, but whatever. It's been a long day. I did a lot of the stuff on the work on the review. I think you'll really like the intro this week. It's very nostalgic, so I think you'll enjoy that. But yeah, I did a live stream yesterday, and I put in the description of that live stream, like, talk about the time that you got into Bleach, like, what got you into the series. And from what I got from reading a lot of the comments is people got into it a lot of the same way I did, at least in the United States, through Adult Swim. Adult Swim was pretty much the one place on television that you can really go to watch unedited, uncut anime. We're not talking about, like, you know, oh, elfin lead with all of the boobs. No, but we're talking about, you know, they can say ass and damn and bastard. I remember watching Yu Yu Hakusho back in the 90s, and it was aired on, they aired it on Toonami, which that was back when Toonami was, like, in, like, 5 o'clock slot, and I remember they had to edit out all the curse words with that. And then they would also air it unedited on Adult Swim later that night. And I'd always feel like I would be getting in trouble from watching it, because Yusuke would say, you know, you bastard, or whatever. I'd be like, oh, I gotta keep this down. But yeah, so that was pretty much the only place you can get anime back then. I didn't get high-speed internet until 2008. I know it was made available way earlier than that, it's just that my household just didn't get it until then, so if it was not airing on television, I was shit out of luck, or I could buy it at the store. I was shit out of luck in that regard. So, the first episode of Bleach, I remember watching. I don't remember the exact date this was, but it was episode 33. And I didn't watch it all the way through. I caught it by accident. I think I was watching Family Guy or Futurama or other shows that were airing on Adult Swim back then. I remember it was a Saturday night, so I was staying up late, you know, probably on the computer playing fucking RuneScape or whatever on my shitty dial-up connection. And after, you know, Family Guy or Futurama ended, or King of the Hill or whatever I was watching, came on this show called Bleach. And it was episode 33, which I don't know if you remember that, as you don't have Bleach clairvoyance as much as I have. You have, like, access to the deep insight of every Bleach episode. But episode 33, that was the fight where Uryu was up against Jidambo's brother, Jirobo Ikanzaka. and he was the wind scythe. He was the 3rd seed of the 7th division, I believe, and Orihime was there also, and that was the fight where she realized really just how fucking weak she was in battle, where she uses her attacker Tsubaki to attack him, and Jirobo just kind of like thwacks it, like bitch slaps Tsubaki, and she's like, oh my god! And then Uryu steps up to plate with his new bow, and that's when we see his new bow, and he fucking shreds the shit out of his Zanpakuto, and then pierces him. If I remember correctly, he actually did the same shit that Byakuya did. He removed his soul chain and Huxui's soul sleet, so Jirobo is no longer a soul reaper. I don't know what they did with him. I don't know if they just chucked him out, like, alright, we just chucked him out in Rukongai with the trash, or what. But, maybe he goes around the Seirei now as like a reserve member, and he goes and tells children the dangers of fighting against Quincy's, and the Quincy's invade. He's like, you know what, kids? You need to remember, don't let this happen to you. Do you want to lose your Shinigami powers to a fucking Quincy? And then the Quincy's invade, and then he's like, I knew it. The public service actually paid off. So my first impressions from watching that episode pretty much were, oh, okay, the guy with the glasses and the white outfit's pretty cool, and that girl with the pink shirt has big tits. That was pretty much my first impression from Bleach, if you want to be. I didn't see the whole episode. I think I just kind of like watched the first 15 minutes or last 15 minutes or whatever part of the episode, and I kept on, I was mostly focused on playing RuneScape back then. That was like my whole life. I was 13 in like probably back then, 12 or 13 or something like that. I started watching it regularly in 2007. 2007 was a big year for me. It was a year I started high school, year I fell in love with a girl I had a crush on a girl for the first time. I don't know if you want to call it love, but it was a big moment in adolescent Tekking's life. And in the summer of 2007 is when I really grabbed hold of that total nerddom, because this was my life in the summer of 2007. This was my life. I would wake up at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, shamble downstairs, spend the entire day on the computer playing RuneScape. I got really into it that summer. That was like the apex. That was like the one I got the most into it. Everyone knows what RuneScape is, right? Because I really hope I'm not making a dated reference. RuneScape was like a big MMO back when, it was free to play. So it was like a poor man's version of like World of Warcraft. And once again, this was back when World of Warcraft was really big. I know it's still really big now, but it was really big back then. That was around the Leroy Jenkins era. I would spend all day from like 2 o'clock in the afternoon to like 3 o'clock in the evening, in the morning, playing RuneScape, and just, in between the times my internet shut off because I had shitty internet, I'd get some food and whatever. And while I was doing that, I was like, I turned our TV to the right, like our old, floor model TV to the right, and I would watch the recordings of Adult Swim every day on basically permanent repeat. Yeah, so my life was pretty fucking pathetic. I mean, I want you to think about that. Like, wake up at 2, go downstairs. We had an old floor model television. I recorded like 3 or 4 hours of Adult Swim, and I would just rewind, stop, play the tape while playing RuneScape all day and subsisting on like pizza rolls and iced tea. That was a pretty... you think back on it now, I was like, that was one magical summer, but goddamn, that was sad. Then again, I was like 13, 14, so I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal. I got a free pass because I couldn't drive yet. But that's when I discovered Bleach. I was watching Adult Swim one night like I always did, and I just happened to come across the first episode. They were airing, I guess they got to the end of the episodes, they were dubbed, so they started back at episode 1, so I just started with episode 1, and it took off from there. Once again, the great thing about, though, having no internet at the time was I really didn't have access to spoilers. I mean, I guess I did, but I didn't take advantage of it because I never looked up to see what was going to happen. Nowadays, there's no way I could do that. Like, when I started to read, like, One Piece, back in, like, 2010 is when I started to really get caught up to all of One Piece. I was already reading the wikis and everything, like, oh, that's what happens in Thriller Bark. Oh, that's what happens with Shabondi, shit like that. So yeah, like, there was really no spoiler aspect. It was just week by week, day by day basis. I think it was like Monday through Friday they would air like episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then on Saturday nights they would air the most recently dubbed episodes. So for example, it would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then like episode 46. and then the next week it would be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I can count. And then episode 40, the next episode after that. Probably my favorite moment of that whole thing was, that was during the fight with Uryu and Mayuri. That was, like, the big moment. That's probably, like, my favorite episodes back then was that. I remember later that year, later that summer, I got, like, a horrible sunburn. Like, the one day I would go outside, I went to the pool with my friend, and I didn't wear sunscreen. I got a horrible, just debilitating sunburn. It was, like, horrible. Like, that, my parents thought I got sun poisoning there for a while, just how fucking big, how painful this shit was. And, so that was, like, I spent a few days held up in my room, just sitting there watching TV. So I got into it there, too. But yeah, I remember, and then I started high school in the fall of that year, and I met a few friends of mine that were into it. This was my freshman year. I met my friend Quentin. He was into Bleach. My friend Quentin and my friend Nick. We would different Nick, but we would both talk about that. Yeah, Death Note also was really big. Death Note, I think, came out in February of 2008, so I was still a freshman, and we would talk about that too. So Bleach and Death Note were like the two big anime we would always talk about then. And I bought my Death Note, and I actually brought it to school one day, and I had to be really fucking careful doing that, because back then there was a lot of kids in the country that actually got in trouble bringing these things to school. But yeah, that was 8 years ago already. Holy shit, that's messed up. But yeah, I was into Bleach after that. Eventually, I started buying the manga. I went to the one bookstore we have in our area, or at least my parents drove me to the one bookstore we had in this area. The first volume I bought was 17. I guess it was just Yoroichi's ass that hypnotized me. I'm more of a boob guy myself, but damn, I mean, can you say no to that? Can you just look at that on the shelf and be like, can you turn away from that? It's hard. Even for me, it's hard. It's really hard. But yeah, that was the first volume I bought. Eventually, they released the DVDs, the box sets, so I started buying those. Correction, I started making my parents buy me those for my birthdays and Christmas and shit. Didn't have a job at this point. Also, I this is really personal, but that was the same time in the summer of 2007. That was the same time my parents were going through a divorce. Yeah, I don't want, like, oh my god, 2007, you said 2007 was a great year, you say one moment, the next minute it's like, your parents were going through a divorce, and you were a pathetic otaku loser that held up in his house all day, playing RuneScape on shitty dial-up internet, and then you had a debilitating sunburn that made you, like, bedridden for a while. Like, yeah, that was a great year. It was a magical year, let me tell you. But yeah, my parents were going through a divorce, so maybe that accounts for a lot of the shit that, maybe I was more into. I was trying to escape through RuneScape and Bleach. I also got into Full Metal Alchemist that same year, but not too much. I didn't get into it as much as a friend of mine did. There was a friend of mine, I went to high school with her. I didn't start talking to her until, like, senior year, oddly enough, but she was, like, as much as I was into Bleach at that point, she was into Full Metal Alchemist, and they aired, like, right side by side. I remember, like, Bleach aired at, like, 11, and then Full Metal Alchemist would air at 11:30, so I would watch the original 2003 Full Metal Alchemist, obviously. So I would watch that sometimes, but I never really got into it until much later, really when Brotherhood came out. I would bring my manga to school. I became known as the weird kid that sat in the back of study hall, and every time someone would ask me what I was reading, I couldn't really describe it to them. Like, I'm reading manga. They're not going to know what the fuck that is. So a lot of times I just said, I'm reading backwards Japanese comics, and they would, like, shy away from me very slowly. Like, all right, is it written in That was always their first question. Is it written in Japanese? I'm like, no, it's English. You got to read it backwards. And, at first, it made, oh, man, I'm going to make friends for a little bit. But then they really immediately lost interest, and then they went away. But my one friend that, I just call her Manga Girl, I met her, I knew her for a while, but I didn't start talking to her senior year. That's how we met. I was reading volume 32, I think, in, like, a class or something, and she, saw me read that, and we talked up for that. So at least I had one friend going on there that read manga. Quentin and my other friends didn't even read manga. They just watched the anime, and they weren't into that for too long either. But yeah, that was pretty much my story on how I got into Bleach. Rest is history. I got caught up with the manga. I started reading it on the websites probably around senior year, junior year. That's when I started, I discovered, like One Manga was the big site back then. I'm pretty sure it's defunct now. I'm pretty sure it's not even a thing anymore. But One Manga was like the manga stream. It was like really the only manga site I remember back then. I'm sure there was a few, but yeah, One Manga was really big, and then they got shut down. And then Manga Stream popped up, and they had some really early scanlations. I remember One Manga always released on Friday, and then Manga Stream came out, and they started releasing their shit on Wednesday, and everyone was like, holy shit! And then One Manga eventually got shut down. And then, so I got caught up through that. By senior year, I was all caught up with Bleach. I remember senior year was the same time that Ichigo fought against Aizen, because that was the big climax with the Deicide chapters. That was when I was a senior in high school. And the Fullbringer arc began, like, as I was, leaving school. When I graduated, literally a week after, I decided to start reviewing it. I had a channel at that point. It was about 2 years old, but I hadn't really used it for a while. I talked about this old game called Medieval. I talked about that game for a little while, but after I was done talking about the game, I didn't really use the channel for much of anything. And I was, honestly, I was debating whether or not just to fucking delete it. At that point, I only had, like, maybe 60 subs from just this video game review I did. And I was about to delete my channel, but you're like, you know what? I like manga. I like talking about this shit. I'm pretty knowledgeable about this shit. I could probably do a review show. And so I had a suit and a tie lying around my room from prom. That's what I bought it for prom, and I just graduated a few days prior to that, so I had my suit and my tie hanging up in my room. I grabbed that. I went into my laundry room. I found a black sheet that was in a dryer, and I threw that up behind me. And I had an old telescope tripod. It was not a tripod intended for camera. It didn't even have a fucking mount thing on the top of it. It was just basically 3 pieces of cheap plastic, 3 sticks, bounded together by cheap plastic. There was no top for it. I grabbed our shitty Sanyo digital camera that we used for, like, family vacations, and I propped it up there. I grabbed 2 desk lamps off our, desks and just made this really fucking haphazard setup for a studio, and made my first Bleach review, Bleach Chapter 452. So, yeah, if you want to watch that, I'll put it right here. I'll throw the thumbnail up for that. Give me a second. Oh, my God. Memories. Okay, this is getting depressing. I don't even know if I still have that. Hold on. I think I have it in my Fullbring archive. No? Did I get rid of that? Oh, I don't even have the folder for it anymore. Times are changing. All right, well, in that case, I'm going to get off now. Thanks for letting me share this with you. Like I said, the review will be out tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoy it. Now, as for the last review, which is next week, that feels weird saying, what I'm probably going to do is, when the chapter is released, the day of, I'm going to be doing, like, a live reaction to that. I never do live reactions, but I think it's worth it in that situation to do a live reaction. So I'll be doing the live reaction, and then it'll be about maybe a week or so before I get the actual review out proper, because I need to know what I'm working with for the last chapter. It's probably going to be a lot of pages. It's probably going to be more than the standard 18, 19 pages, so I want to get as much packed in as possible. I want to know what I'm working with. I want to give more time to think about jokes and skits and stuff I'm going to say at the end. But I pretty much, in terms of, like, what the intro is going to be and the outro for the final episode, I have a pretty good idea what that's going to be. It's probably going to make you cry. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to make anything, like I want to set it in stone, but that's my goal. It's going to make you cry, because we're all crying. Alright, well, thanks for watching, everybody. Share me your story below if you haven't already, if how you got into the Bleach series. And that's pretty much it. Tu finito. I think that's Italian for the end. Don't know. Tu finito, maybe, probably. Someone Italian, correct me on that. If that's not Italian for the end, please tell me, because I was lied to.